Okay, so the 2004 tsunami. I mean, everyone remembers where they were when they first heard about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those events, just the scale of it. 14 countries,
Yeah.
over 225,000 people.
Yeah. Caused by the third most powerful earthquake ever recorded. So that kind of explains the huge impact.
Yeah, for sure. And we could do a whole deep dive just on the science behind it.
Hmm.
But for this one, we're going to explore the human side of it,
Oh,
the story's survival. Through a new documentary, it's called Tsunami, Race Against Time.
I saw that. It's really well done. It's pretty raw.
Yeah, super raw. Like it throws you right into the chaos. It shows you how everyone was scrambling for information and then it weaves in these personal stories.
Yeah.
Just incredible.
Yeah, and they use a lot of that archival footage from 2004, right?
Yeah.
Alongside interviews with survivors today.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's so powerful seeing those two things side by side. Like you'll see these terrifying images from back then, and then the same person talking about it now, 20 years later, it just hits you on a different level.
It's like, whoa, they lived through that.
Right. Like there's this one story about a woman trapped in Emerald Cave in Thailand.
Hmm.
Have you ever been?
I haven't, no.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's like this hidden beach inside this cave,
Mm.
and the only way out is through this narrow tunnel. But then the wave hits and fills the whole tunnel with water.
Oh my gosh.
The way she describes it, it's so vivid. Like you feel like you're right there with her. It's claustrophobic, you're trapped, you don't know what's going to happen.
I can only imagine.
And the crazy thing is, the filmmakers, they actually delay telling you if some of the survivors made it or not. Like they keep you guessing.
Wow, that's a bold choice.
Yeah, for sure. But it creates so much suspense.
Yeah.
Like you're on the edge of your seat, wondering if the person telling their story is even alive today.
I bet. It must be really intense.
Oh, totally. And it kind of makes you think about how different things were back then in terms of information, right?
Yeah.
Like no smartphones, no Twitter, limited internet access.
And it was Christmas Day, too, wasn't it?
Yeah. So many people were completely cut off. Like they had no idea what was happening. Yeah. And the documentary does a great job of showing that through this one guy, Barry Hirshhorn. He was the seismologist at the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center. So he's the one who detected the earthquake.
So he knew it was coming.
Exactly. But he couldn't get the warning out to the Indian Ocean.
Oh, why not?
No warning system in place.
Yeah.
And even basic communication was down in a lot of areas. It's
Well-
heartbreaking. Like he knew this massive wave was going to hit, and all he had was a landline phone. He's desperately trying to reach someone, anyone, but no one's picking up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can you imagine that feeling?
Just knowing what's about to happen.
Yeah.
And not being able to do anything.
Right. It's just this feeling of utter helplessness. And they show this other guy, too, Eli Flournoy. He was a CNN editor working the Christmas shift. He talks about how all this news was pouring in, but there was just silence from Banda Aish.
Banda Aish.
Yeah, like a black hole on the map.
Oh, wow.
And as hours went by, it became pretty obvious that Banda Ace was the closest to the epicenter, so it must have been the hardest hit.
That's chilling. The silence, like the lack of information is almost more terrifying than the information itself. Makes you think.
It really does. Like how we depend so much on instant news now and social media. It's all right there all the time. Like, could you even imagine experiencing something like that now in our world?
I don't know. I mean, would it be easier or harder? Like you'd have constant updates, right? But also probably so much misinformation too.
Right. So much noise.
Ah.
It's a good question to think about.
Yeah, for sure. But even with all that chaos and tragedy, this documentary shows something amazing. The resilience,
Oh, yeah.
the human spirit. Incredible. Like even after losing everything, some people still found ways to help others. It's amazing.
It's like in the face of this like overwhelming tragedy, people just have this urge to do something, to connect, to offer comfort, anything.
And it's not all sunshine and roses. The film shows that not every survivor had the same experience.
Exactly. Like some were able to adapt and rebuild, but others face these huge obstacles.
Yeah. Recovery isn't always straightforward.
The documentary shows how tough it was for marginalized groups who were already facing problems before the tsunami hit. Like imagine losing everything, your home, your work, your family. And then on top of that, you have to deal with all this bureaucracy just to get help.
Yeah, it's just heartbreaking. The film shows how, for some survivors, just proving what they'd lost, like filling out forms, became another layer of trauma.
And it doesn't shy away from the long-term impacts, like the mental health side of things.
Yeah.
Many people were still dealing with PTSD years later, the flashbacks, nightmares, anxiety.
Yeah, the scars run deep, both physically and emotionally, for sure. And that brings us to another thing that the film explores: international aid. Oh yeah, the support from all over the world was incredible, but it must have been so hard to coordinate. You've got all these different groups, governments, different goals, different ways of working. The documentary shows how difficult it was to make sure aid got to the people who needed it most and that it was distributed fairly.
Hmm.
There were cultural differences, language barriers, and of course, worries about corruption.
I remember reading about that back then. Does the film go into that?
It does. It asks some serious questions about accountability and transparency in disaster relief. You know, it doesn't blame anyone specifically, but it stresses how important it is to have strong systems in place to prevent misuse of funds and make sure the aid is actually effective.
You're so right. It shows how, even with the best intentions, things can go wrong, and when people are desperate, any mistake can have huge consequences.
It's not a simple issue, and the film doesn't pretend it has easy answers, but it does provide a platform to talk about these challenges and think about solutions.
Yeah, so we've covered the human stories, the race against time resilience, the complexities of aid. What else struck you about the film? Anything about how it was made that you found particularly effective?
Well, apart from the powerful visuals, the music and sound design really hit hard.
Hmm. Oh, yeah, totally. There's this one scene where they show the wave hitting the coast, and the sound is just so real. Like you can feel the force of the water, the roar, the crashing. It pulls you right in.
And then in other parts, like during the interviews, they'll use quieter, more reflective music, which creates this intimacy. You really connect with the people sharing their stories. It's like the music is taking you through the emotional journey of the film.
Yeah, it's masterfully done.
Yeah.
And the way it's filmed, too, like those aerial shots that show the scale of the devastation, and then they'll cut to a close-up of a survivor's face, and you see every emotion in their eyes.
It's powerful. You see the enormity of it, but you also see the individual lives shattered.
You get it. It's a reminder that behind those huge numbers are real people, each with their own story of loss, resilience, and hope.
And the filmmakers did such a good job of showing that without sensationalizing it or exploiting the suffering, it's all handled with like a lot of sensitivity and respect.
Yeah, you can tell they approached this project with a real sense of responsibility, not just to tell a story, but to honor the people who lived through it.
And by doing that, they created something truly special, a film that stays with you.
Absolutely. But beyond the film itself, I'm curious about your take on the bigger picture. How did the 2004 tsunami change our understanding of natural disasters and our approach to being prepared?
Well, in a lot of ways, the 2004 tsunami was a wake-up call for the world. It showed how vulnerable coastal communities are and what can happen if you don't have good early warning systems.
Right, I remember after the tsunami, there was a big push to make those systems better, to teach people about the risks and invest in stronger infrastructure.
Exactly. The tragedy sparked big changes both in technology and in how we think about disaster preparedness around the world.
It also showed how important international cooperation is, right? The disaster was so big that no single country could handle it alone.
Definitely. The 2004 tsunami proved that we need a global effort. Governments, aid groups, scientists, everyone working together to respond effectively.
And as we said earlier, it exposed the challenges of delivering aid ethically and efficiently.
Yeah, it's an ongoing learning process. We're always trying to improve our response, learn from mistakes, and ensure aid gets to the people who need it most.
So in a way, even though it was awful, the 2004 tsunami forced us to face some tough realities and make positive changes.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even in the worst situations, there's always room to learn, grow, and create a more resilient future.
And that leads us to the last episode of the documentary, which focuses on the long process of recovery and rebuilding.
It's inspiring to see the survivors' determination, their commitment to putting their lives and communities back together.
The stories of people who lost everything but still helped others really got to me. It says so much about humanity.
It shows the power of community, how we support each other during difficult times.
Makes me think about how technology influences our experiences now. Like if the 2004 tsunami happened today with everyone having smartphones and social media, would the response be different? It's a tough one, right? Would technology help or hurt? I mean, instant communication could save lives, right? Like if you could send an alert to everyone in the area, give them time to get out, but then you have to think about the possibility of mass panic.
Yeah, and rumors spreading, which could make the rescue efforts even harder.
It's like a catch-22. And it makes you think about how we'd react as individuals. Would we be constantly checking our phones, trying to reach loved ones? Would we even believe what we're seeing online? Would we be helping or making things worse?
It's a huge ethical question. It all comes back to digital literacy,
Yeah.
being able to judge information, not spread false stuff, especially during a crisis.
This documentary really makes you think about the bigger picture. It's not just about what happened, but how we as a global community deal with these tragedies and how
Right.
technology is shaping everything for good or bad.
It's always changing, and we have to remember technology is just a tool. It's up to us how we use it.
So true. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the 2004 tsunami, what's the main takeaway you want our listeners to think about?
I think it's this. The 2004 tsunami was a horrible tragedy, but it also showed us something incredible about humanity. Even amidst all the destruction, there was amazing courage, resilience, compassion.
Hmm.
It reminds us that even in the darkest times, there's still hope. And we have a responsibility to learn from these events, build a better future, and support each other when these things happen.
I love that. It's a tough topic, but it's important. In this documentary, Tsunami, Race Against Time, it does such an amazing job of bringing those lessons to life.
If you want to understand the human side of these disasters and see the strength of the human spirit, you should definitely check it out.
I couldn't agree more. It's a powerful reminder that we can't control nature, but we can control how we respond, how we support each other, and how we create a more resilient world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another exploration of the stories that shape our world.